The router R1, you can see in the diagram, has 3 interfaces. And for the demonstration, I'm going to configure 3 separate security zones. The internet zone, which is designed to connect out to the internet, which will need to be assigned to interface serial 0/0/0. The private zone, which will be assigned to interface gigabit 0/1, and the DMZ zone, which will be assigned to gigabit 0/0. To allow traffic between separate zones, I'll need to define zone pairs and 3 zone-based policies, which will define what traffic is allowed or inspected between the private zone and the internet zone, traffic from the internet zone going to the DMZ in order to reach our publicly available servers, and also a policy to define traffic which will allow or inspect traffic from the private zone also to reach the DMZ. In defining which traffic is allowed to go from zone to zone, I'll configure 3 access lists, and I'll need to configure 3 sets of class maps, policy maps, and zone pairs. Class maps are configured to define which type of traffic will be inspected. These class maps are then assigned to a policy map, and then the policy map is assigned to the zone pair, which defines not only which policy will be used for inspection, but also what is the source zone and the destination zone that you're pairing together. Let's start configuring the zone-based policy firewall. I have a console connection to a Cisco 1941 router here. I'll enter it, get to global config mode, and start by configuring the access lists. Access list 100 will permit IP traffic from any source to any destination. I'll use this access list for the private to internet zone policy. Access list 101, which will permit IP traffic from any source address, in this case, let's say on the internet, to reach host 192.168.2.252, which happens to be my web server. And access list 102, which will also permit IP traffic from any source address to reach host 192.168.2.253, which we'll say is my mail server. Now I have 3 access lists defined, and it's time to create my zones. To create the zones, I type zone security and then the name of the zone. Zone security internet for the internet zone, zone security private for the private zone, and zone security DMZ for the DMZ zone. The name of the zones do not have to be in capitals. I use capitals to easily identify that this is a variable or name that I created and is not a built-in command within the router. Now that I have my 3 zones, I need to assign the zones to the interfaces on the router. So we'll start with interface serial 0/0/0 and put zone member security internet. So now interface serial 0/0/0 is part of the internet zone, and interface gigabit 0/1 will be in zone member private, will be in the private zone, and interface gigabit 0/0 will be in the DMZ zone. Once the interfaces have been assigned to the zones, traffic should no longer be allowed by default. Let's see if that's the case. I'll open up my command prompt and attempt to ping router R2 at 10.1.1.2, and you can see that traffic is not allowed between the zones once they've been assigned to the interfaces. That's because they're all separate zones. We'll go back to the console connection, and now it's time to create our policies. To create the policies, you start by creating your class maps. The first class map that I'll define, we'll start with the private to internet policy, and I'll start with my class map type inspect. I'm going to match all instances and give it a name private ACL class. And for this class map, I'm going to match traffic defined by my access list that I created, access list 100. So I'll just put in match access-group 100. I'll also create a second class map, type inspect, to match any of the following items. Instead of match all, I'm going to use match any, and I'll name this private-internet class. And I'll use this class map to match individual protocols that I'm interested in inspecting and allowing, and also getting information from the firewall from the various types of protocol traffic. So I'll match protocol HTTP. We'll allow HTTP traffic or inspect HTTP traffic, inspect HTTPS, DNS, FTP, ICMP to allow pings, and SSH connections. So now that I have my two class maps defined, I need to create the policy map and then assign those class maps into my policy map. So we'll say policy map type inspect, and then give it a name. It's going to be private to internet policy. To assign the classes to it, I type class type inspect, and then the name private internet class, and the action inspect, and class type inspect private ACL class, which was our class defined by our access list 100, and we'll also inspect that traffic. Now I can use the action inspect or allow or drop. In this case, we're going to inspect the traffic, which will essentially allow the traffic out and then allow return traffic to come through. And then for non-standard traffic that is not matched by either of these class types, I can put in class dash default, and if I leave it blank, it will default to an action of drop. And I'll just leave it that way. So now I have my policy map, and I attached my two class maps to my policy map. And now it's time to create the zone pair and assign the policy map to the zone pair. To do this, you type zone dash pair, security, and give it a name. In this case, I'm going to put private dash to dash internet. And then the source zone, which in this case is the private zone, and the destination zone, which is the internet zone. I assign it the policy map by putting in the service dash policy type inspect, and then the name of the policy that I want to attach to this zone pair, which in this case is private dash internet dash policy. So now my first zone-based policy is in place, and I should be inspecting traffic going from the private network to the internet network, or from the private zone to the internet zone. If this is in place and working, I should now be able to ping router R2, which is in the internet zone, from my current PC, which is PCA in the private zone. So I'll put in the ping, and from the replies, you can see that the traffic is going through. Now, to create my next two policies, I'll just exit, go to global config mode, bring up my zone-based policy, which I've already typed into Notepad. I'll go to my second policy here. This is for the private network to the DMZ. So you can see here I've defined a class map to inspect and match any traffic defined by this private DMZ class. I'm matching protocols HTTP, and then there's the policy map, which I then assign the class map to it, and then my zone pair and the policy map, which is assigned to the zone pair. I'll highlight it and copy it and paste it into global config mode. And there's my second zone-based policy. This should allow me to ping from the private network to my server. Let's test it out. I'll go back to my command prompt, and this time I'll attempt to ping the server at 192.168.2.252. And you can see that it worked. What enabled that to work is the fact that in this second policy map, I'm matching, once again, the ICMP protocol. My last zone-based policy is a policy designed to allow traffic from the internet to reach my servers in the DMZ. To do this, I've separated out my class maps for the different types of protocols and the different servers. So the first class map matches DNS, HTTP, and ICMP. The second class map matches SMTP for a mail server. And then I assign these class maps into an additional class map, which also matches access list 101, or in this case, access-group, access list 101, and then assign a matching statement of the previous class map into it. So class maps can be assigned to other class maps. And then the second one here, class map, match all SMTP ACL class, also matches an ACL, in this case ACL 102, and the previous class map defined above. So once again, it assigns a class map into another class map. Then these two class maps are assigned to the policy map, and the policy map is assigned to the zone pair. I can highlight it, copy it, and go into my console connection. I'll go back to global config mode and then paste it in. Now, if this zone-based policy works, then I should be able to switch to router R2. I'll just switch connections to router R2. Now I have a console connection to R2 and attempt to ping the web server at 192.168.2.252. If I can ping the web server at 192.168.2.252, I'm effectively initiating communication from the internet zone to the DMZ. And you can see it work. So my third policy is in place and working. To recap, in order to create a zone-based policy firewall, you need to define your zones, assign your zones to your interfaces, decide which policies you're going to create by pairing which zones, create ACLs if needed to define different types of traffic to match, and then write your class maps, policy maps, and zone pairs. The class maps can match traffic defined by access lists, or it can match traffic defined by other class maps, or it can match individual protocols. Class maps are then assigned to policy maps. Policy maps can be assigned multiple different types of class maps or class types. It can also be assigned a default class of traffic, and then policy map is assigned to a zone pair. The zone pair needs a name as well. Just as policy map and class maps get a name, so does a zone pair. And it needs to define which is going to be the source zone and which is going to be the destination zone. And then you assign the policy map to the zone pair. Beyond this basic example, zone-based policy firewalls can be configured to an even greater degree of granularity and control.